Hi everyone, thanks for watching me here on I See Melanie, and today we're going to be talking about episodes 7 through 9 of season 7 of Love is Blind. Now, a lot happened in these episodes, a lot of things that went nice and smoothly as I kind of anticipated, and a lot of disasters that I just did not see coming. So let's get into it. Let's start where we left off last time, and that was with Nick and Hannah. And I must say, I was actually pleasantly surprised by their interaction in these episodes. I think there is more potential for them now than I did before. I still don't think they're the strongest of couples, but things seem better. So when they're still in Mexico, they go bungee jumping together, which I think is such a wild thing to do, but they do that and they joke about who's more mature. Of course, Hannah thinks she's more mature, and I think in some ways she is. But I think they're both equally kind of immature, quite frankly. We see Nick and Hannah at the apartment that they're staying at, and from the jump we see that Hannah is a bit of a clean freak. She's wiping down everything to the nth degree. She has her little dog with her, so obviously that requires more cleaning, but Nick isn't really like that. Life is kind of back to normal because Nick is back at work, and so we see him coming in at the end of the day. So Hannah is already starting to make dinner, and Nick says, yeah, he's going to help out and contribute to it. He doesn't know how to boil pasta, which I don't know if I believe that. I think he can do that much, but we learn that he's very much, a bit of a mama's boy. Hannah goes to Nick's residence, and we learn that he lives with his parents. So his parents have a house, and he lives in the basement of the house. So Hannah makes a comment like, oh, you're 28 and you live with your parents. And in the confessional, I think Nick said that, yeah, he's working on ramping up his real estate career. And in the meantime, he's going to stay with his parents until he can get out. And if he's getting married, he's going to get out. I personally do not think it's crazy for a 28-year-old man or a woman, whatever, to live with their parents. In 2024, in this economy, I think that's completely reasonable. Telling a bit about my personal life, I lived with my parents until I was 27, which I wish I got out sooner, but I basically finished school at 23. I was working and I didn't want to pay for rent, so I saved up and I bought a place. And so I left at 27. Luckily I had a car so I can leave and, hang out and, go out and stuff. But I stayed there, and I say to anybody, especially young people out there, if you have parents who are willing to put up with you and put you up in their house, and you just have to contribute like maybe some groceries and maybe a bill here or there. But if you're able to save the money you would spend on rent by staying with your parents, I say go for it completely. But of course, work towards getting your own independence so that you can move out. Like, don't plan on staying there. But yeah, if you have parents who will do that, because not every parent will. Nick's parents pay some of his bills, and I didn't have that. My parents did not pay for my phone or my insurance or whatever. I paid for that myself, so that may be a bridge too far. And also, I think that's kind of his parents' fault in a way to coddle him that much. But again, in the dollar and cents perspective, if Nick is creating this career so that he doesn't have to depend on his parents anymore, then, I think he's in the right direction. Nick's mom seems so loving, and we can understand why Nick still lives at home, because she seems like a very lovely lady, very accommodating to him and the sports that he used to do, very nurturing. And she and Hannah got along swimmingly. They got along very well. And she was talking about how the memories that she had when she used to take Nick to his football games as a kid, or baseball games, or whatever. And he says how those were some of the best memories he has, and he wants to do that for his kids going, in the future. So it was just very lovely to see that they have such supportive parents. And yeah, they were just lovely. Later on at the apartment, we meet one of Hannah's brothers, Cade, and Cade seemed really cool from the jump, and he and Nick had a good rapport. And what struck me, he, like her other family members, he did not seem as stressed out as Hannah was, like their general personality. At one point, Nick makes a joke about Hannah being unemployed, and she didn't like this. And then later on, she went somewhere and Cade and Nick were talking, and Nick said, well, sometimes she makes some jokes that kind of go a little bit too incisively, like she kind of goes over the edge. And Kate said, yeah, like I've had that issue with her my entire life. She goes a little too far sometimes. So they've got that connection too. So we see that Nick isn't crazy. He's not Delulu when it comes to her and her personality. To be honest, I think I am more partial to Nick because to me, he just comes across as a goofy little brother. And I don't have any little brothers. He's a lot younger than me. He just seems like kind of a kid, which begs the question, should he be getting married? But he just seems like a nice guy with a good heart. Then we meet Hannah's parents, and I was really, really surprised when I saw them. I heard them talk because they just seem so laid back. Hannah doesn't seem anything like her family members, and that gives me hope that she can change her personality trait, because even her mom says, like, you look very stressed out right now. You need a massage. And the dad said something to the effect of like, you need to stop nitpicking on little things, because she mentioned about some things about Nick that irritate her. And he said, you need to get over that. These are small things. They aren't insurmountable. And I think at some point, maybe then or earlier on, she mentions that she's been out since she was 18, which I personally find wild because I was still in high school at 18. I went to university at 19. I cannot imagine being solely responsible for myself. And maybe that's revealing a lot about me, but that's how I feel. So, and she has been an independent woman since she was legally a woman, basically, and she's done all these things on her own. So yeah, she's going to be very idiosyncratic when it comes to her cleaning and the cooking and all these like stupid little things. I think they're stupid ultimately. So she'll have to bend. I think Nick is a person, even though he doesn't know how to boil noodles, I think he could learn that. I think he has a drive enough to learn these domestic types of things, and that they can work those details out of all their problems. The domestic types of stuff are the least of them. So that's where we leave them off. So they were actually pretty good. Now on to Taylor and Garrett. We see that they're just as in sync as they usually are. They are looking at his spearfishing Instagram picture. She's saying that he's a bit of a nerd because that's all he has. But, you know, if he likes fishing, he likes fishing. And then they talk about his parents and how the parents are kind of apprehensive about this whole thing and the possibility of him taking up and moving to San Diego because all his family is based out here in the East and they don't want to see their boy go, really. And anyway, so we meet them eventually. So we meet his parents, we meet a sister, and I think a niece and or a nephew. And they all seem like lovely, lovely people. Actually, most of the family of these people seem lovely. And they mentioned their reservations, right? I think the sister is the first one to mention that, you seem lovely, and we think we're going to learn to love you as well, but we don't really know you right now. This whole process is kind of crazy, and we just want our boy to be okay. And, him getting married and then uprooting to the other coast is such a big deal. So they are apprehensive about that. But again, you can see that there's a lot of love in that family. And Taylor is, of course, she's very understanding to that, and she expresses how much she loves and respects their son. We meet some of Taylor's friends, and we see that they are very happy to see that she's happy and that they've never seen her this excited and elated and beaming with another guy before, so they think it's the real deal. And of course they're like, oh, take care of our girl, like usual kind of stuff. But they really seem to take to Garrett. We learned that Taylor's dad won't be filming anything because he's not comfortable with being on camera, which I can totally understand. And I think she said that he's not cool with the entire idea. He's not completely, which again, totally understandable. And later on, we see evidence of how gracious and supportive Garrett is when he helps out with another storyline that we'll get to. But one thing that I noticed is in one of Taylor's clips, she mentioned that it was a nice fall day. And I really wondered, when did they film this? Because right now I'm recording this, it is October 10th. And so fall technically has only been 2.5 weeks. And I know sometimes you get fall-like weather in early September. But if you guys happen to know when they actually filmed this, that would be really cool. Also, I should point out, I noticed in this episode in particular, there are gold cups all over the place. Like all the cups are gold. I don't know why. Tim and Alex seem to have gotten over whatever that fight was about. They went on their ATV little trip and the trust has been restored and they're willing to go for it again. So that's nice. I'm hoping that this will be for real because Tim looked really mad the last time, but hopefully he and Alex can get their communication going better. Later on, they're at an apartment, and this is where Tim is going to meet her family. So he's out grilling and getting the food ready. And we learned that Alex hasn't told her dad that a proposal has happened because she thinks it will be too much for him. And she has mentioned several times that like Tim's really going to have to talk to her dad. And again, totally understandable from these parents' perspectives. We meet the parents and two brothers, and one was actually quite cute. Anyway, so Tim is talking about their meeting, and they share about all their similarities and how much they love each other and things like that, how he feels comfortable crying with her, talking about the family and all these good types of things. And the brothers seem to like him too, especially the cute one. And then later on, they have dinner, and then Tim and the dad speak on their own. From the jump, the dad looked very cynical, and again, totally understand, but Tim reassures him that he loves his daughter and that he wants to do right by her, marry her, but he wants to get his official blessing on the proposal. And he got it. The dad got emotional, and it was just very nice. And so I'm very happy that things are working well for them. So later on, we go to each of their places, so we see what things are like. So Tim has a nice apartment. It's very masculinely styled, a lot of leather couches like the Lazy Boy and everything. It was nice though. Then we go to Alex's place, and she just has stuff all over the place, which if I'm being truthful, her in my place looks a bit more like Alex's than it does Tim's. I'm not that bad though, because frankly, she just has so much stuff. When she showed all the bags of things she needed to donate, and like I would love to have the space to have bags that big and that many to donate. To me, all those things, like not even considering the clutter, just the amount of things that she had, clothes mostly, would have me as Tim asking questions about like, what is she like fiscally? Is she a shopaholic? Is she a very superficial, frivolous spender? Because that to me would be a big issue. Okay, let's go on to the messier bits. And so I'll start off with the least messy and end with the supreme mess at the end. Let's now talk about Marissa and Ramses. So they were having a little discussion about the theme for their wedding. Marissa wants a black theme. He wants a bit more colorful theme. They're kind of fighting over that playfully. It's not really that big of a deal. But then when they're back in DC, we learned that Marissa's commute to Baltimore is quite hefty. I think she said like 2 hours. So they're definitely going to have to move to Baltimore. And Ramses said, yeah, he's totally cool with it. And so she was talking about like her new career and her old career. Again, she was in the military. And so she says, yeah, I'm done with that chapter of my life. I'm not going back to it, but I really enjoyed my time in the military. It was very formative for me, and I met a lot of great people, and the people who sign up for it are sacrificing a lot to be in it. And Ramses is kind of on the other side saying, well, they signed up for that. They signed up to do a very dangerous job, and it's not a job that he would want for her. He's glad that she's done with it and is glad that she's never going back to it. And he doesn't agree with it on principle because the job of being in the Navy or the Army is to go to other countries, and you will very likely have to kill people, right? And she mentioned even an example where she had to press a button to launch, I don't know, some kind of a weapon of mass destruction of some sort. And she said she couldn't do it, which I found interesting. I don't know how true that is, because in the Army or the Navy or Marines, whatever she is, when you're told to do something, you have to do it. You have to do what your person above you tells you to do. Anyway, so they talk about the differences and their feelings on it. And I personally, which you might have guessed, I lean more toward Ramses' side of thinking. Well, I pretty much 100% lean toward his side. And she mentions that, people do this for many different reasons. She has been in the Army like through her parents or her mom, and like for herself when she grew to be an adult. And my personal opinions, and I'm trying not to get too political here, is that I think, and I'm Canadian, and I probably know more about the American military than I do the Canadian. I don't know a lot, but I think it's kind of unfortunate that a lot of people have to go to the army or find themselves in the armed forces to get an education and to be able to afford a life, because education, higher education in the US is just like Canadians. We don't understand how you guys pay the amount of money you pay for your tuition. Like, it's just leaps and bounds higher than what we pay here in Canada, because our schools are more publicly funded, right? They're expensive, but they're not like American scholarships or American tuitions. And so I understand why people do it. I'm not judging people who do it. I don't think people who go into it are just, oh, I just want to be murderous. Like, no, that's not what it's like. A lot of people do it because that's one of the only jobs they can get, or that's a way to be educated. And I don't like the fact that that is the way people go about educating themselves. I think, if I'm not mistaken, when I've been to Times Square, there is a kiosk where you can go and sign up to be in the military or get information about it and things like that. And that's in a tourist area. So it's kind of, I always think it's kind of gross that, yeah, you know, we got all these Mickey Mouse and Spider-Mans and breakdancers, and yeah, hey, sign up for the army while you're here too. I always thought it was so weird. Anyway, Ramses meets some of her friends from the military, and they ask him the same questions about how he feels about it. He says what he feels, and that one asks if she were to go back, would that be automatic divorce? And he said yes, because that's a deal breaker for him. And they seem a little turned off by that. Again, they are in the military. And kind of going back to what Marissa said, like, she said that those people, those bonds that you form with your fellow Marines or Army people is very strong. And I can completely understand that. I can't imagine all the jobs I've worked at in an office and going on fancy business trips. I never have held my colleagues' life in my hands, and they were never responsible for keeping me alive. So that kind of a bond you just can't get in most workplaces, right? Like you do in the army. So I completely understand that. And they have that emotional connection to it that he just fundamentally does not. We meet Marissa's family, so her mom and one or two siblings, and the siblings seem totally cool. They seem very laid back, kind of like Marissa. And then we meet the mom, and she is gruff, she is direct, she is abrasive, and she is cynical. She is not a warm and fuzzy lady at all. And so at first, like, girl, like, you have no filter. She insults his hair right away and says that he looks like an 80s breakdancer, with true talk. It does look very 80s-esque. And they're talking about like his past, and he was saying about his previous wife and how he got divorced and how they were so young. He was 25, and the mom says 25 isn't that young. I personally think 25 is very young to be married, but we all have different life experiences. The mom brings up the topic of prenups, and she wants Ramses to sign one. So I personally think that this is an issue that she should kind of step out of. This should be between Ramses and Marissa. But he agrees that, yeah, he's willing to get one. So even though she's not loaded now, she's just starting her law career now, she has great potential later on. And so, yes, and he agrees to it. And I personally 100% agree with prenups. I think everyone getting married should get one. The mom is just so cynical. She's like, you know what? I'm not gonna make you ask for my blessing. You know, I hope you treat my daughter right, I guess. You know, who knows? I don't believe in forever. I don't believe in marriage forever. So like, if you divorce at some point, you know, like whatever. But, you know, I guess, you know, treat her okay. And she even called Marissa like a bitch at some point. It's like, I know me and my mother could never have a rapport like that. And I know every relationship's different, but I just found her to be so, oh my gosh, like I wouldn't want to spend too much time with her. Then things kind of go a bit sideways. So Marissa and Ramses are back at home, and they're talking about children and how she wants to wait, 5 years, whatever, before she has kids. And I think they're kind of in alignment with the timeline. I forget. But then the topic of birth control comes on, and she says she doesn't want to be on hormonal birth control anymore. And so that would mean that he would have to wear condoms. And he's complaining that he doesn't like wearing them and all this stuff. And they're like, well, something has to happen because, you know, unless we're celibate throughout this entire marriage, somebody's going to have to go on birth control, and I don't want to put my body through all these chemicals. And so they kind of end on that, which is like, Ramses, like, you were like, serious. Anyway, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, now let's go to the train wrecks, and I'll start with train wreck number 1. That is Monica and Steven. So this went so sideways. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's start off when they're at the resort still, and they're all at a pool party. All the couples are there. There is a fireworks show, and Monica is with the rest of the crew, and they're looking at the fireworks, and she gets really pissed off that Steven didn't go look at the fireworks with her. And I think this is one of the things where I don't know, personally, like, you're a grown woman, they're fireworks. Fireworks are not a big deal. Like, they're nice, I like looking at them, but I wouldn't be pissed off if my partner's like, oh, I'm not gonna look at the fireworks. Like, how old are you? You 5? Anyway, so she's upset with that. And we see she's kind of giving him the cold shoulder throughout the entire thing. And so he mentions, I was talking to Garrett about something and I didn't want to leave mid-sentence or whatever. And then in front of Taylor, she mentioned, I think Garrett was there too, she mentions that, he mentioned, that this experience is going to like rise their profiles. Everyone's going to know who they are. And all these women are going to come out of the woodwork and want to, do stuff with him. And that was just so weird. It's like, why are you mentioning this in front of your future wife? That you're going to be so popular and you're going to have to like beat off these women with a stick. Like, it's so stupid. And then later on, they go back to DC, and I noticed this right away. It kind of struck out to me, the differences between them when it comes to finances or socioeconomic levels. So when they're at the apartment, he's looking at the view, and it's somewhere in DC, and the view is very nice. And he's making a point to mention, like, this is so great. Like, this is so grand. This is like something you'd see in a tourism magazine or something like that to that effect. Kind of showcasing that he's not really used to these type of things. And I get the impression from Monica that she is used to this type of stuff. So that was clue number 1. And then throughout, I think in this episode too, we learned that his job is no longer there, so he's unemployed for right now. And then we learned that she is upset that he's not following through with gestures of love. So example, flowers. She wants flowers all the time. And I have a lot of feelings about cut flowers. These are my fundamental issues with cut flowers. So obviously, they're very pretty. Like, I don't think anyone's denying that, and they smell good. But cut flowers last 5-7 days if you're lucky. They don't last very long. They're very expensive. And to me, in a weird way, when you have a cut flower, you are taking away the lifespan of that flower. And I'm not like a flower, hugger or anything like that. But it's just like, why are you cutting this thing to have it live for maybe a week when it could thrive a whole spring and summer on a tree? So for me, I would personally, if somebody's going to give me a plant, I would prefer a plant, like a house plant or maybe like an orchid or some kind of a potted flower that has longevity. And also, I think it's kind of silly. Like, do you always need these this type of gesture of love? Like, does that mean love? Somebody can go buy flowers every single day. That doesn't mean anything. It means that that's part of their routine. They buy flowers as often as they buy, I don't know, paper towel or whatever. What does that actually mean? So I think I personally think that's very silly, especially she's a 36-year-old woman. Like, you should have bigger priorities than that. And so they're talking about like sex stuff, and I did notice that she seemed a bit put off by the crudeness in which he was speaking. And of course, I don't think if you're with your partner, like, you can talk about all sorts of sex stuff. I don't think that's inappropriate per se, but I could tell that she seemed a bit grossed out. We see them finally bond. He takes her to some flower workshop and they're doing some craft with some flowers, and they seem to be having a good time. And we've also learned that she's been spotting him financially because he has no job, which is like, you see that hard pressed, a couple days coming back without anyway. So one thing I also noticed is that Monica's very competitive, and she's like, oh, well, my thing looks better than yours. And she asks the woman who's running the workshop, like, oh, which one's better? It's like, I don't know. I think she's a little immature. One of the last scenes we see of them is Monica, and she's there with Taylor. I'm like, oh, what's Taylor doing at their apartment? So she tells Taylor that Steven didn't come home the night before, and apparently he said he was at a sleep test. She is questioning whether that is true. And we learned that he has been texting some woman some very kinky, fetishy things. And of course, she's very upset by this. And I think I forgot to mention earlier on, I think while they're even still in Mexico, that Steven was showing signs of hesitation to getting married. He was a bit overwhelmed by the whole thing. And he's like, yeah, marriage is a big deal. And she's like, yeah, of course marriage is a big deal. If you thought that it wasn't a big, like, why are you even on this show if you didn't want to get married? Anyway, so going back to the apartment right now. So yeah, so she's very upset about these text messages. Steven is actually still in the place. I guess he's packing up because he is going to leave. They talk and she's like, you're supposed to meet my parents tomorrow. What is going on? And he's saying, yeah, I understand you feel that way. And I was drunk while doing a sleep test. I'm like, I don't really know how that works. But he apologizes and he explains that he understands. But she's like, that's not good enough. And so he agrees to leave. And she's like, okay, but Venmo me the money that I spotted you over these past couple of days. And so he does. And then he leaves. So I was confused on a couple of fronts. Again, I don't know if this is a Love is Blind thing. Again, I'm new this season, but a lot of things happen off screen. So I didn't see what happened. Also, I'm not exactly sure how she saw his text messages. Like, was he not with his phone? I guess that's not really a big deal. But yeah, so they are broken up. They are just done. And I've seen some things offline, like some things on Instagram he's posted as of yesterday. But yeah, I felt bad for, even though I thought Monica was a little unrealistic, I did feel bad for her. Imagine, like, this is somebody you said you're going to marry and you're on this show for, and he like betrays you a few days in, basically. It must be very embarrassing. So yeah, they're done. And I didn't think they were the most stable out of all the couples, but I didn't think things would implode so badly. So the last one, okay. So I have said several times that I thought that Tyler and Ashley were a perfect match. I first described Tyler on the first episode as Mr. Perfect. I said how they have God together, they're praying together and all that kind of stuff. But, there's some things that are just incongruent with all that. So while they're still in Mexico, they're having a great time. I say they're crying and praying together. That's all they do, cry and pray. And they go on their camel ride. They have a good time. When they get back to DC, they're talking about their kids, so what they're going to name their kids, all this good stuff. We meet Ashley's dad, who's very dapper, very nicely dressed, and he seems like a lovely man as well. And he and Tyler hit it off right away. And yeah, Tyler gets the dad's blessing. So everything is very good. And we see that, again, I mentioned in the first episode that Ashley seemed the most traditional out of all of them. And her dad was saying that, he trusts her judgment. Like, I think Tyler asked for the blessing, but he's like, I see the way she's looking at you and I trust her. She was raised well. And so if she likes you, I like you. Yeah, you have my blessing. And it was very nice. Ashley mentions that guys these days just aren't as chivalrous as Tyler is, and how it's such a nice thing to have a man who would do these more traditional type of things. Little does she know. And then we cut to the final scene. Again, more offline things happen. And we learn that Tyler has 3 biological children. So he was a sperm donor. To who exactly, we're not quite sure yet, but he has 3 kids. A set of twins and another kid. And this is something that Ashley is just finding out about. And she said, you had several opportunities to bring this up and you never did. And so that has me questioning your integrity and how honest you are. So to that I say, that's really terrible. Again, we don't know enough right now. I've seen some offline things, but I'm going to wait until we see things on the show. But let's say, again, he's a sperm donor, right? So maybe he has like 2 lesbian friends who need a sperm donor, or he has a male and a female friend and they needed sperm to have a baby or whatever. Because I get the impression that he knows these kids. They aren't, he didn't go to a sperm bank, or they're not, kids who are far removed from him. I get the impression that he's in their lives. So that is something that a fair amount of people have in common, and that's something that you just have to accept. And it's not a bad thing. It's just very different from most families. But that's a lot to chew, right? And I think that if you're going to marry somebody, you should know these types of things beforehand. So that's one thing, but I think the bigger thing for Ashley and what would be for me is the fact that you just omitted this, because obviously at some point it's going to come out. And you telling me this after we're married has me questioning you and your integrity. Again, not about you having kids, just about your integrity and if you're an honest, forthcoming person. So I have said, again, many times I've said that they are very saccharine, very sweet. All they do is pray and cry, and they're not really that interesting to talk about because they're just kind of perfect on the surface. I think that ship has sailed, and we're going to see a lot of imperfection in the next round of episodes. That was just, came out of left field. So who knows how things are going to go. We have seen scenes for the coming weeks. But I'm going to wait until we actually see things before I start speculating anything. But I will speculate the same things I do every week. So Taylor and Garrett, always consistent. Tim and Alex, I am much more confident in now. And I think that they can make it. Marissa and Ramses, I'm less confident in now. I think real life is really setting in for these two. And I don't know if they can reconcile some of their differences. Nick and Hannah, I feel more confident in, but I still don't have the most confidence in their chance of making it to the altar. Monica and Steven, that was just a mess. And I think for both their sakes, it's good that they broke up. I'm just sad for Monica that it happened in this very embarrassing way. And Tyler and Ashley, I don't understand. I can't believe he kept something so big from her when he was so open and honest and talked about open communication. It's so disappointing. If I were Ashley, I'd be questioning everything he said to me. And again, it's not that him having kids or biological kids is a bad thing. It's just the deception or the lie of omission. So yeah, we'll see what happens next week. I saw some previews, obviously, but we know those things are always full of misdirection. So I'm not going to take anything I see too seriously from those things. But yeah, I am enjoying the show. It's very dramatic and entertaining. So I'll be back next week with a recap. I think next week they're releasing 2 episodes. So I will be talking about those. And yeah, I would love to know what you think about everything. Please leave a comment in the comments area so we can start a discussion. And I'll see you later on I See Melanie, okay? Bye, everyone.